Michael Dudok de Wit, congratulations on your Oscar nomination for The Red Turtle for Best Animated Feature Film. How did it feel when you got the news you'd been nominated?
Well, obviously it was fabulous because basically it would always be great, but this year there were many more films in competition than the years before, and very strong films, and the chances that The Red Turtle would be nominated were quite slim, I thought. It turns out that not only is The Red Turtle nominated, but also another French indie, which I think is remarkable.
Right. I mean, what's so great about this year is that it shows such a wide range of animation, not just countries, but styles as well. So it's really, congratulations on getting in. Now, you've won an Oscar before for Best Animated Short Film for the film Father and Daughter. Take us back to that night. What was it like when you won the Oscar?
I was already slightly familiar with the setup because another short film had a nomination before, and I went to the ceremony. It did not win, but I saw the whole procedure. I didn't realize how big the Oscars were in the early 90s because I'd never watched the ceremony on television. Of course, they were important, but somehow I was in another world. And once I came to the States, I realized, my God, this is big. I mean, there's a lot of hype around it. So I enjoyed it fully. I enjoyed the whole party ambience. And when that short film called The Monk and the Fish did not win, I was down because when you prepare your speech, you put yourself in position of someone who accepts an Oscar, and you have to do it really well. So you live it so thoroughly that it becomes a bit like a surprise when it turns out your film did not win the Oscar. So a few years later, about 10 years later, I went back with a new film. And again, I prepared a speech, and it was 1 in 3 nominations, short films nominations. The other 2 were very strong. So I had no idea what to expect. The film won. It was surreal because your first thought is walk to the stage, don't get distracted, don't trip over, just get there on stage. It becomes incredibly important, much more than it really is. But once you stand on stage, you accept the statue. It was from Ben Stiller. It was really nice. I didn't know who he was then. Of course, I do now. But I thought, yeah, he's charming. And I turned around to watch the audience. And while I was speaking, a very short speech, I looked straight in the eyes of all these stars that I knew so well, the Meryl Streeps, the Clint Eastwoods, and so on. And I thought, this is bizarre because I'm looking at them, but they are also looking at me. And then only after I'd done my speech and done press photography just behind the stage, like 100 photographers screaming your name because they want you to look in the lens of their camera. Then I walked by myself in the corridors behind to go back to my seat, and then it sunk in. Then I thought, do you realize your film has won an Oscar? Isn't that incredible? And it was great. As a result of the Oscar, winning the Oscar, I got some really nice commercials done, actually for the States. I directed them and I designed them, and I really enjoyed them, and they were well paid. I was happy with that. But honestly, apart from that, life goes on as before, more or less.
Right. Well, congratulations again on your Oscar win and on your nomination. Let's talk a little bit about The Red Turtle. Where did the idea for this movie come from?
The idea started very simply with the theme of Castaway on a Desert Island. An old theme. I knew it since childhood because there was a series on TV, black and white series called Robinson Crusoe. And I watched it and I thought, at the time I thought, my God, how much do I love this? And it stayed with me my whole life, not just because it's a cracking good story, but it's more, it touches you very deeply, the story. It really stayed with me, not like how would I discover fire or how would I find food, but what is it to be alone, really alone, not for a month or a year, but much longer? What is it to have no reflection at all from society? How genuine am I? How much do I suffer, or how happy am I? So it stayed with me, and the day the decision was taken to make a feature, it was not my decision in a way. It was an invitation to make a feature, literally a letter. And I immediately thought, oh my God, if I make a feature, then what I have to think of an initial seed. And I thought of the Castaway story as a beginning of a story, but it's a very strong beginning.
It is. Now, making the transition from shorts to features, what were some of the difficulties of that?
So yes, I expected it would be difficult, and I wasn't wrong. It was just because the learning curve is very steep. You have to learn new skills. In my case, I had to learn how to delegate to a group of artists. What usually I would do alone or with just two or three friends. There it was a whole group. I had to invent a story which is complex. I'm happy with the short films I've done because they were very simple stories with one piece of music, and it just clicked. It worked perfectly. I didn't even struggle on them. It just clicked. A feature film is a very different energy. It's much more complex, and it's not just a question of adding ideas, but complex in the sense that the whole thing has to work in such a way that the audience doesn't, the viewer doesn't disconnect from the story. That was my main worry. So that was tough. Physically, it was tough because I tend to work hard, but I'm not used to work hard and being very dissipated over different parts at the same time. That's a very different kind of way of using your brain, and it was exhausting in the beginning. The good side also was when I saw the first scenes and the first backgrounds coming out of the on screen from the first animators who arrived and the first background artists, and apart from the very, very first ones where you're still trying to find your way, but let's say after a month or 2 months, when I started seeing the first scenes, I thought, this is really good. It's better than I could have done. I'm very happily delegating all the animation, literally all the animation, 100% of the animation, to the other artists because they are better at it than I am, and that's a very nice feeling.
Well, you were working at Studio Ghibli, which has a great reputation for animation. So, what was that like working with working under that banner?
Yes. So we're talking about two adventures. One was to make a feature, and the other one was to work with Studio Ghibli. I've watched their films since the early 90s, adored their films, adore them, well, most of them, and certainly Miyazaki's and Takahata's films. And so in 2006, they literally sent me a letter saying, if you're thinking of making a feature, we would like to produce it, and we would co-produce it with our distributor in Paris, Wild Bunch. So basically, they said, let's make a feature, and they confirmed to me that I would write the story, I would do the design, and they also added, let's take it step by step because it's a new adventure for them. It may not work. It's definitely new for me, and we can't really guarantee that it will work. And indeed, many features, not just between us, but in many with many other artists and in the States too. Many features have a start but are never made because it just doesn't work. So in this case, when they said let's work together, and I immediately thought, oh yes, because they are very much directors' films orientated. They have a sensitivity which I've studied in their films, which I like, which I feel deeply. And we just had we clicked. We had a good communication. We talked calmly and normally about things. There was no need to prove myself or them to prove themselves, because basically they chose me. I asked them, so why did you choose me? They said, because of your short films and in particular your film Father and Daughter, the one that won the Oscar. Although they didn't mention that. They never mentioned the Oscar. They liked it a lot. They said they liked it really a lot. Takahata has used it over and over again to teach at university. And basically, when I say Studio Ghibli, I'm talking about Isao Takahata, who directed many feature films, and the producer Toshio Suzuki. The third person is Miyazaki, Hayao Miyazaki, but he was not involved at all with the Red Turtle. He was fully occupied with his own feature film, The Wind Rises. And working with them, I was hoping it would work because I like Japan. I'd been there as a tourist. I have an affinity with classical Japanese art, especially the very pure art, especially the brush drawings, the very, very pure Zen Buddhist brush drawings. I discovered them when I was a young adult and I fell in love with them. So I feel a connection with Japan on that level. I'm not unique. Many of my colleagues do, because it's very exquisite the way they do it in Japan. Equally in China, equally in Korea, but somehow the Japanese gave them a dimension that really worked for me. And so I had a connection with Japan. They had a connection with Europe because their films are inspired by Europe, obviously. When you see them, but also Takahata himself speaks some French. He studied French. He studied French culture. He has a passion for France in general. And although we didn't speak French between us, I know he speaks French because he has written me letters in French. So I hoped it would click, and it did click straight away. And basically, their involvement was during the the story development phase, not while we made the film, but while I wrote the story and I storyboarded the story, and I designed many stills to give a flavor to the film. And that's where I went regularly to Tokyo to bring them up to date and to ask for their feedback. And they gave their feedback. And they were very respectful. They often said that they didn't want to impose their feedback on me, that it's up to me to decide. But I was eager to listen, not just for technical reasons, because they're much more familiar with feature films than I am, but I wanted also to feel the Japanese sensitivity and to feel Takahata's sensitivity. And by the way, Takahata was the spokesperson for Studio Ghibli. I didn't speak with all of them at the same time. He somehow decided, or they decided, that Takahata would be the one-to-one conversations, and he in turn would talk with the people at Studio Ghibli, and people like Toshio Suzuki were often present at our meetings, but I would mostly talk with Takahata directly.
Right. One of the unique aspects of this film is the fact that there's no dialogue in it. I mean, there's some grunts and there's some haze and things like that, but basically it's a silent film. Can you talk a bit about the decision to do that?
Yes. It was never intended to be like the big decision, we are going to make a silent film. And more even, in the beginning, there was some dialogue. I had written dialogue in the script, not much. When you see the film, you see that for the first 20 minutes or so, you just follow one person in nature, and he's not talking to himself. So it feels very natural that there's no dialogue at that moment, and not even a voiceover, nothing. And then when there are other people in the story, I thought, okay, there will be just a few sentences just to establish the relationship between them, to give a bit extra little flavor, and importantly, of course, to feel empathy towards the characters. And that worked intellectually. I'd written it down, people liked it, I liked it, it was fine. But it didn't feel right. Somehow it felt alien to the film. Partly, we still not really explain it, but I can give the partial explanation, because the film very clearly establishes that we don't know who the main character is, the man who arrives on the desert island. In other words, we can feel him because he's quite expressive with his emotions, but we don't know which country he's from, which century he has lived in, which position in society he has had. He is virgin in a way. You see what you get, and that works, and that's enough. In this, of course, in this film. In other films, it would be very inappropriate. So when he would start talking, suddenly you get a lot of messages. First of all, his nationality. Then on a very subtle level, we hear a lot of messages in voices. So we would immediately feel more of his background, and that I felt was somehow not appropriate for this film. That's one reason, and there may have been other reasons. But the solution was simple. We dropped the dialogue. And I had to make sure that the sensitive scenes where there's some kind of visual communication between the people would feel very as natural as possible. And the aim is with this film is that you don't see a film where amazingly people don't talk, but you see a film where, of course, people talk, but it just so happens that you don't see them talk while you're watching the screen. So they may talk off screen, and just when you're watching them, they don't talk. And I also have to add that one reason why I like that there's no dialogue is there's an honesty about it. You don't expect any dialogue, but it makes the film also slightly surreal, and timeless. Timeless in the sense that you don't know which where it belongs, which time in history, but also timeless in the sense that it becomes slightly more like a fable. And you although it's quite realistic in design and quite realistic in storytelling most of the time, you feel that it has a myth. It resembles a myth a little bit, and that really works for me.
Certainly, I mean that is evident when the red turtle of the title comes into the film, and then what happens between the man and the turtle. Can you talk a bit about that? I don't want to give anything away for you if you haven't.
Yes, thank you for not spoiling it. The few journalists I've spoken with, some of them have not spoiled it, others have taken the liberty to describe in detail what happens, to my big surprise. But so I'm very happy you're not spoiling it. Yes, the turtle is not just an animal in the story, it's more. It's special, and we feel that right from the beginning, because when the turtle arrives in the story, it's the first time we see a marine turtle, and it's not just any turtle. It's huge, and it's red, and it approaches the man in a very particular way, and it's like an iconic moment. The moment they stare at each other, and the turtle. In a way, I can say, although it sounds a bit flat and a bit light, but it's more than that. I can say the turtle deeply represents nature. The man is civilized. You can see that because he's wearing clothing, and you can feel it, of course, from his behavior. He's not a prehistoric man. He's basically a man who has been on a ship, and the ship has sunk, and he is nature in an alien environment, and he has to come to terms with it, with nature, and he does, in his way. The turtle is already part of that alien environment. The turtle is nature. And one reason why the creature, the turtle, was chosen, and not another creature, and the best thing I can say is that the story needed a creature. It just felt so right when I wrote the story. I wrote the story just by walking around and sitting alone and thinking about the story. And at some point I thought, no, the man tries to leave the island, but he can't. Something is stopping him. And what is it? It's a creature. And then I thought, I scanned my mind. And when the turtle came up, the marine turtle, I knew it was the right choice. So that's an example of how intuitively we make decisions. But then you have to stand back and look at them intellectually, because you're making a film for other people, for God's sakes, and it has to work. And you make sure that there's no wrong symbolism or confusion, whatever. Lots of questions. And I like the turtle. I like the turtle because it's not a cute animal. Indeed, you'd rather not touch it. It has a fierce expression. It's a reptile with a really hard carapace, and same time it's moving. People love turtles. It's a very moving creature, and we're in awe of this creature. And it's not human, of course, but it has arms and legs and a head, and it can breathe, and it goes on land. So it's not a fish. It's really a very special creature. It totally belongs in the ocean, which in the film symbolizes infinity. You can feel that. It totally belongs there. That's her home. That's where she swims for thousands of miles for years before coming back to the beach. And yet she makes the effort to go on a beach and to lay her eggs. I mean, in the film you don't see her lay eggs, but that's what she does. And that's very moving. She nearly dies in the process because it's so heavy, but then she goes back in the ocean and goes where she belongs. So that's the best I can say about the turtle and the man.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a great movie, and congratulations on it. Congratulations on your nomination, and thank you so much for taking the time to chat. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.